The sound of his voice, older now, but still unmistakably his, nearly made me hang up the phone. 12 years of silence shattered by 5 simple words. Hello? Who's calling this late? I'm 39 now. The last time I spoke to my father, I was 27, fresh off a divorce that had left me bitter and looking for someone to blame. My father became that someone not because he deserved it, but because he was the safest target for my rage. He'd always come back, I thought. He always had before. But this time, he didn't. It's strange how you can live your life thinking you're fine without someone, convincing yourself the hollow space inside isn't actually there. I built a new life in those 12 years. New job, new city, new wife, new daughter. I found success in tech sales, bought the house with the yard, took the family vacations to national parks. From the outside, hell, even from my perspective most days, I was a man who had it all figured out. My wife Sarah never pushed me to reconnect. She knew pieces of the story, fragments I'd share after a few drinks on anniversary nights, or when something on TV triggered a memory I couldn't quite suppress. Your father sounds like a complicated man, she'd say diplomatically. What she really meant was that we sounded complicated, too similar, too stubborn, too wounded. I told everyone it was about the betrayal. That simple explanation was easier than the truth. He chose his new wife over me, I'd say. He missed my wedding because of her. Or sometimes, he borrowed money he never paid back. Small injustices that could justify 12 years of silence if you stacked them high enough. But alone, usually during my midnight drives when I couldn't sleep, I knew the truth was far more tangled. Yes, there was the time he'd chosen a vacation with Diane over attending my college graduation. There was the time he'd criticized my first wife at our engagement dinner, saying I was settling for comfortable instead of challenging myself. There was the Christmas he'd promised to visit, then called on December 23rd to say Diane's family had invited them to Aspen instead. But those weren't the real reasons. The real reason was that I was terrified of becoming him. Terrified that beneath my carefully constructed exterior, successful, stable family man, I was just as selfish, just as prone to walking away when things got difficult. The day before I cut him off, he had called to congratulate me on a promotion. In the middle of our conversation, he said something that haunted me for years. You've always been like me, son, good at starting over. I hung up and never called back, because I knew deep down that he was right. My father had left my mother when I was 15, not with drama or screaming matches that almost would have been easier. Instead, he slowly pulled away over years, staying later at the office, taking business trips that grew longer, until one day he sat me down and explained he'd be moving out. People change, he said, as if that explained everything. Sometimes they grow in different directions. To a teenager struggling to understand who he was, watching his father grow in a different direction felt like a betrayal of everything I thought family meant. It wasn't until my own marriage started falling apart at 26 that I realized how easily it could happen. How you could love someone deeply and still wake up one day feeling like you couldn't breathe in your own life. I survived my divorce by becoming a fortress. I dated casually but kept women at arm's length. I poured myself into my career. I told myself I was nothing like my father. I wasn't running away. I was being smart, protecting myself. Then I met Sarah. She saw through the walls immediately. On our third date, she asked me point-blank why I was so afraid of needing someone. Instead of running, I found myself telling her about my father, about the divorce, about my fear that deep down I was just like him. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing, she said. When I looked confused, she continued, your father made mistakes, but he also raised a son who's kind, successful, and self-aware enough to worry about hurting others. That had to come from somewhere. Over the years with Sarah, I slowly began to heal. When our daughter Emma was born 5 years ago, I promised myself I'd be different. No growing in different directions. No walking away. I would break whatever curse I thought had been passed down. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning out my home office when I found an old box of photographs my mother had given me before she moved to Arizona. Most were from my childhood. Baseball games, fishing trips, a camping adventure in Yosemite where my father and I had gotten caught in an unexpected snowstorm and had to huddle together in our tent, telling stories to keep warm. There was one photo that stopped me cold. I'm maybe 7 years old, sitting on my father's shoulders at what looks like a county fair. My small hands are gripping his forehead, and he's reaching up to steady me. We're both laughing so hard our eyes are squeezed shut. I don't even remember the moment, but there it was, evidence of a time when we had been truly happy together, when I had trusted him completely. I sat on the floor of my office for a long time, staring at that photo. Emma found me there. She climbed into my lap, looked at the picture, and asked, "Who's that man, Daddy?" "That's your grandpa," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Why haven't I met him? Children have this way of asking the exact question you've been avoiding. Their innocence cuts through all the justifications and excuses adults wrap around their wounds. "Because Daddy made a mistake," I finally said. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the moments my father had missed with Emma. Her birth, her first steps, the time she decided she was going to be a paleontologist and spent 3 months demanding we address her as Dr. Emma. I thought about how much my father would love her fierce independence, her wild imagination. Traits that, if I'm honest, probably came from his side of the family. I also thought about growing older. My father would be 67 now. How many years did we have left to repair what was broken? What if something happened to him and Emma never got the chance to know him at all? What if something happened to me and I died with this weight still on my heart? At 2:17 a.m., I found myself Googling his name. I wasn't even sure he'd still be in Oregon or if he and Diane were still together. To my surprise, his number popped up immediately, listed for a home address in Portland, the same house he'd moved into with Diane all those years ago. I sat in my car in the garage, the engine off, my phone in my hand. I almost backed out a dozen times. What would I even say after 12 years? Sorry, I was wrong, you were right. None of the options felt adequate for the gap we'd created. Finally, I just dialed. It was late, almost 11 p.m. in Portland. Too late to be making social calls. A part of me hoped he wouldn't answer, that I'd get his voicemail and could leave some carefully crafted message. But then came that voice. "Hello? Who's calling this late?" My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. I nearly hung up. "Hello?" he said again, impatience creeping in. "Is anyone there?" "Dad." I finally managed. Just that one word. Nothing else would come. The silence that followed felt eternal. "Jason?" he finally said. His voice suddenly alert, as if he'd been doused with cold water. "Is that you? Is everything okay?" Something about the immediate concern in his voice, the fact that after 12 years of nothing, his first thought was for my welfare, broke something open inside me. "Yeah, Dad, it's me. Everything's not okay. It hasn't been for a long time, but I'm okay. Physically, I was rambling, words spilling out without direction. "Hold on," he said. I heard rustling, a door closing. "I'm just going into my office. Diane's asleep." More shuffling, then the creak of what I imagined was his old leather office chair. "I'm here now. You can talk." So I did. I talked about Emma, about Sarah, about finding the photograph, about realizing life was too short to keep carrying this weight. I didn't apologize, not directly, but I let him hear the regret in my voice, the longing for something I'd thrown away. He listened. That was always one of his strengths when he chose to use it, the ability to just sit in silence and let someone else find their words without rushing to fill the space. When I finally ran out of things to say, he was quiet for so long I thought maybe the call had dropped. "Dad, I'm here," he said, his voice thick. "I'm just processing. This is a lot, Jason." "I know."
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
I'm. I'm grateful.
I've dialed your number so many times over the years. Never had the courage to press call. It was my turn to be silent, absorbing the revelation that he had wanted to reach out to. I didn't know you had a daughter, he finally said. I have a granddaughter. The pain in his voice matched something inside me. Her name is Emma. She's 5. She's smart as a whip and stubborn as hell. He laughed, a choked sound. Sounds like she comes by it honestly. We talked for 2 hours that night. Not about the past, there would be time for that, but about the present. About Emma's kindergarten adventures and Sarah's work as a physical therapist. About his retirement from the architecture firm last year. About Diane's battle with breast cancer 3 years ago, now in remission. All the life we'd missed in each other's worlds. Before we hung up, he asked if he could meet Emma. The question hung between us, weighted with everything unsaid. I knew that saying yes would mean more than just a meeting. It would mean opening a door I'd kept firmly shut, letting him back into my life with all the complications that would bring. I'd like that, I said finally. She should know her grandfather. 2 days ago, my father flew down to San Diego. I picked him up at the airport alone. Sarah had offered to come, but this felt like something I needed to do myself. I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was completely white now, his shoulders slightly stooped. But his eyes were the same, that clear blue that Emma inherited, the eyes that crinkled at the corners when he spotted me in the arrivals hall. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he set down his bag and opened his arms. The hug was brief, formal, the embrace of strangers trying to remember how to be family. But it was a start. The drive home was quiet. I'd prepared a dozen topics of conversation, but they all evaporated in the reality of his presence in my car. He looked out the window at the passing landscape, occasionally commenting on how much the city had changed since he'd last visited, over 15 years ago. Your mother told me you were doing well, he said suddenly. We talk sometimes, you know, on birthdays, holidays. She sends me pictures of you and Sarah from Facebook. I didn't know how to feel about that. My mother, who had been so hurt by their divorce, keeping him updated on my life when I wouldn't. The thought that he'd seen photos of my wedding to Sarah, of our house, of moments I'd deliberately kept from him, left me feeling exposed. She never told me, I said. She respected your decision, he replied simply. We both did. When we arrived home, Sarah was waiting at the door. Emma was at her friend's house for a playdate. A deliberate choice we'd made to give the adults time to navigate this reunion before bringing a child into the mix. Sarah hugged my father with none of my hesitation. It's so good to finally meet you, she said, and I could hear the genuine warmth in her voice. She'd been pushing gently for this reconciliation for years, never forcing but always leaving the door open. We sat in the living room with coffee, making stilted conversation about safe topics. The neighborhood, his flight, the unusually cool weather San Diego was having. I watched him take in the room, his eyes lingering on the family photos on the mantel, the children's books stacked on the coffee table, the evidence of the life I'd built without him. Your home is beautiful, he said finally. You've done well for yourself, Jason. Thanks. I hesitated, then added, I learned from watching you. Your work ethic, if nothing else. Something flickered across his face. Pain or gratitude? I couldn't tell. I tried to teach you what I could. I know I failed in many ways. It was the closest either of us had come to acknowledging the past. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Sarah, sensing the tension, excused herself to pick up Emma. Take your time, she whispered to me as she left. You two have a lot to catch up on. When the door closed behind her, my father and I sat in silence. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed abnormally loud. I should have been there for your wedding, he said finally. For your graduation. For all of it. Yes, I said. You should have. He nodded, accepting the blunt response. I won't make excuses. I made choices I thought were right at the time, but looking back, he trailed off, staring at his hands. Looking back, I see all the ways I put my needs above yours, my happiness above your stability. Was it worth it? I asked the question I'd wanted to ask for decades. Leaving, starting over with Diane. Was it worth what it cost? He looked at me directly then, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. That's not a fair question, Jason. If I say yes, it sounds like I don't regret hurting you and your mother. If I say no, I'm denying the life I've built, the love I have with Diane. He was right. It wasn't fair. But fairness hadn't been my concern for a long time. I can tell you this, he continued. I regret how I left. Not that I left. Your mother and I were making each other miserable. Staying would have taught you an even worse lesson about marriage. He paused. But I should have found a way to be your father even while I was figuring out how to be happy. That's my greatest regret. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was truth in what he said. I remembered the tension in our house before the divorce, the cold silences, the separate lives my parents had begun to lead under one roof. When you stopped talking to me, he said quietly, I told myself it was what I deserved, that I'd failed you so badly you were better off without me. That wasn't it, I admitted. I was scared. Of what? Of becoming you. Of walking away when things got hard. I swallowed. When my first marriage ended, I saw myself turning into you. I couldn't face it. Or you. Understanding dawned on his face. So you cut me off to prove you weren't like me. He gave a sad smile. By running away from our relationship. The irony wasn't lost on me. Yeah, not my most self-aware moment. We both laughed then. A small broken sound that somehow cleared the air. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. Recognition of the complicated tangle of love and resentment and fear that had defined our relationship. The sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted the moment. Sarah was back with Emma. Are you ready for this? I asked him. He wiped his eyes quickly. No, but I want it more than anything. The front door opened, and Emma ran in, stopping short when she saw the stranger in her living room. She looked at me questioningly, suddenly shy. Emma, I said, my voice thick, this is your grandpa, my dad. My father stood slowly, as if approaching a wild animal he didn't want to startle. He knelt down to Emma's height. Hello, Emma. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you. She studied him seriously, then looked at me. Whatever she saw in my face must have reassured her, because she stepped forward and said, Do you like dinosaurs? My father's face broke into a genuine smile. I love dinosaurs, especially Triceratops. That's my third favorite, she exclaimed. Come see my collection. Just like that, she took his hand and led him toward her bedroom, already chattering about her plastic dinosaur figures and the book of facts she'd memorized. He looked back at me over his shoulder, his eyes filled with wonder and gratitude. Sarah came to stand beside me, slipping her arm around my waist. How did it go? I watched my father and daughter disappear down the hallway, their heads bent together in sudden conspiracy. It's a start, I said. A complicated, messy start. Family usually is, she replied. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, extracting a promise from her grandfather to read dinosaur books with her in the morning, my father and I sat on the back patio with beers. The conversation came easier now, lubricated by Emma's natural ability to break down barriers. She's extraordinary, he said. You've done a good job, Jason. Better than I did. I'm trying, I said. Every day. I'm trying not to repeat the patterns. He nodded, understanding. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than what came before. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars appear. There was still so much unsaid between us, so many years to account for. One evening couldn't erase more than a decade of silence. But sitting there, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just relief or resolution, but possibility. The possibility that we might find a new way forward, not as the father and son we had been, but as the men we had become. "I'm here for 4 days," he said eventually. "I know it's not enough time to fix everything. I'm not even sure fix is the right word." "No," I agreed, "but it's enough time to start something new." He looked at me then, his face softened by the dim patio lights. "I'd like that, to start something new." In that moment, I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. Not as the father who had left, nor as the abstract concept of paternal disappointment I'd carried for years, but as a man. Flawed, aging, seeking connection before it was too late. A man not so different from myself. "Me too, Dad," I said. "Me too." This morning, I drove him back to the airport. The goodbye was different from our hello. A real embrace, tight and lingering. Emma made him promise to call on video chat every Sunday to continue their dinosaur discussions. Sarah invited him and Diane to come for Thanksgiving. I don't know what happens next. 12 years is a long time, and one visit can't bridge all that was lost. There will be difficult conversations ahead, moments when old hurts resurface. We may never fully recover what was broken. But watching him walk through the security gate, turning back to wave one last time, I felt something settle inside me. A weight I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Not gone completely, but lighter, manageable. On the drive home, I found myself thinking about that photograph again. My 7-year-old self, perched on my father's shoulders, both of us laughing. For the first time in years, the memory didn't bring pain. Instead, I felt something like hope. Hope that Emma might have her own such moments to remember someday. Hope that the cycle of hurt could end with us. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't walking away. Sometimes it's walking back, knowing the road will be harder for the time you've been gone. Tonight, I'll call my father just to check that he made it home safely. It's a small thing, a simple gesture. But after 12 years of silence, it feels like everything.